right, welcome to Kowalski Analysis, Mr. Alan Parr. How are you today?
Man, I'm doing great, great. Glad to be here. Super excited to join you and looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too. I've been very excited for this because as I was getting ready for it, I'm like, you can talk about a lot of stuff. I mean, you talk about relationships and you talk about, answer some of the questions that I get a lot on sex, but then you also talk a lot about like end time stuff, which is an interest of mine. So I'm not exactly sure where the conversation is going to go, but I know I'm going to enjoy it. So
Yeah,
really excited to have you.
awesome. Same here.
So tell me about, are you coming in from Dallas? Is that where you're at now? Are you in Texas?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we have two kids, and we live in a suburb just north of Dallas called McKinney, Texas. And I've been in Dallas for about 20, 21 years. I came down here in 2000 to attend Dallas Theological Seminary and left my career as an engineer behind in 2000, and been pursuing a ministry, basically a life in ministry ever since.
So do you pastor a church too, or is most of your ministry done on social media?
For years, I was kind of a bivocational minister. I was never a senior pastor. I've served in a variety of roles as a staff pastor, whether it's a worship pastor, because that was a huge part of my life. I was leading worship, and I've done some Christian education stuff. I've done youth ministry. I've done children's ministry. I've done a lot of different ministries. But my greatest passion is really teaching the word
Yeah.
and helping to disciple people. And I've never, I don't really have a desire at this point to be a senior pastor, although I do quite a bit of speaking outside of YouTube and online ministry. But my huge focus right now is just really building up the online ministry.
I love it. No, I don't blame you for, not necessarily wanting to pastor, be a lead pastor of a church. You're on the opposite end of the spectrum where I think like I have a passion for helping pastors get their message from the pulpit to the phone because it's such a broader audience, like instead of trying to get people into the four walls of your church, like get it onto the phone where so many more people can consume it. I don't know how many times I've sat in church on Sunday and my pastor will just deliver this message. It's just fire. And I'm like, man, I wish my friends were here to hear this, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't really mastered how to take it and put it onto the phone, so like far less people consume it. And so I love what you're doing, man. I really think it's needed. It's the future for the gospel and the church.
It really is. Yeah. And that's what the Lord really laid on my heart some 7 years ago. Started this channel in 2015, kind of started the planning for it in 2014. And that really, literally what you just said is really what God put on my heart is that, hey, we can only reach so many people through the local church. But God has gifted us this blessing called the World Wide Web, and why not use it to spread the truth throughout the world.
Yeah.
And nowadays, a lot of people who aren't going into churches, they're going to consume their content somewhere, whether it's church, whether it's Google, whether it's YouTube, Facebook. So why not put our message in front of people who are needing it the most?
Yeah. Now, how many views do you have on YouTube? You got tens of millions, I'm sure. Do you have hundreds of millions?
Total views right now is this number just boggles my mind, but it's 46 million last I checked of just total views.
Yeah.
And in terms of subscribers, it's at last I checked 619,000
I saw
subscribers,
that.
which
That's crazy.
I never ever believed that was possible when you start out at zero, as everyone else does. I mean, you don't even think about those type of numbers at all. You never do.
Right. How long
Um,
did it take you to get one? Because it took me about 6 months to get one subscriber.
it takes it takes some time. I'm telling you, I remember celebrating like when we got our first 100 subscribers. I was so pumped. I was so excited. I was like, wow, 100 people in this world believed in me enough to press that button and subscribe. And I was super excited about that. Like
Right.
100 people is not a small number. That's a lot of
Right.
people.
No, that's all.
Yeah. And it just kind of grew from there. God's been so faithful. He's been so
Yeah.
faithful.
What was it like when you first, so you just straight jumped from your engineering job into this, or was there like a transition period where you kind of slowly exited out?
Yeah, so I started college in 93, graduated with my master's in 98, thought that I was going to be an engineer and kind of go the corporate route. And then in 1998, actually 2000, actually 1998, I got a position at Ford Motor Company as an engineer. And really, it wasn't a horrible position, but right around that time, I was just really developing and kind of learning my calling as a teacher, as a Bible communicator or whatnot. And I got my first chance to preach and teach a Bible study. And it was at that moment that I just knew, like, okay, this may not pay a whole lot of money, but this is what I ultimately want to do with the rest of my life. And when I compared that confirmation or that sense of fulfillment and passion and calling with what I was experiencing at the job, it was like a no-brainer. It's like, okay, this is what I need to do. So it's at that point in 2000 that I actually quit my career as an engineer and pursued my seminary education here at Dallas Theological Seminary. And I never, ever looked back really at the engineering. I did work a part-time engineering job while I was in seminary just to kind of pay my way through. But really, I kind of turned my back on it shortly thereafter. And it's been ministry ever since. And then after seminary, I actually started teaching high school math because I wasn't like full-time on staff at a church. So I was teaching high school math for 11 years. And then in 2017 is when I finally, after all this time, was able to go full-time in ministry and in entrepreneurship. So it's been a
dream,
journey.
dude. You're living the dream.
I'm
No,
trying, man.
I look forward to it. And it's such a I guess it's the wilderness period. It's the way I look at it. God takes you from your Egypt to your promised land, but that wilderness at times is taxing. It's not
Oh,
fun.
yes.
But if you don't quit, as the word says, do not grow weary, because if you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. And that's what I look forward to, because then you really are living the dream. You're doing something that you love. It's impactful for the kingdom, for eternity, and you're getting paid. So
Right.
it's like all the way around. But so let's just dive into it. I was looking at some of your most viewed videos, and two of them actually of your highest viewed videos is sex before marriage, should you or shouldn't you? And where is sex before marriage clearly a sin in the Bible? So that's definitely something that I'm passionate about. Mostly really kind of started down this journey myself from just real world experiences. Like I was a man whore, and God called me, and I just basically waited for selfish reasons. I thought God would give me a wife if I didn't sin. So I was trying to be obedient to him, and I also wanted to, fall in love. So I waited. I didn't understand the concept, and after time, I really understood it. But it was a lot of it was through practical, just through practical experience. So I'm curious to hear that. And I haven't heard people push back on that to say, um, that for whatever reason they've tried to make it like it was okay. They tried to what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I'm talking about? They tried to
Justify.
justify it, exactly. They tried to
Mhm.
justify why it was maybe a sin back then, but it is okay now. So I would love to hear you kind of break that down for some of our listeners.
Well, yeah, and uh, interesting. In terms of reasons why, well, first of all, from a biblical perspective, I think people are just looking for a loophole to kind of justify what they really want to do. And I think that's one of the things about people, coming over to Christianity. It's always this fear of, okay, what am I going to have to sacrifice? What am I going to have to give up? What, what pleasure that I'm currently enjoying am I going to have to forego by being a Christian? And they don't realize that, okay, yeah, you're foregoing something, but you're grabbing onto something, or you're obtaining something so much greater, which is peace and God's blessings and favor on your life. So, when people ask the question, well, where in the Bible does it clearly say, that sex before marriage is wrong? I mean, it's all throughout the New Testament, where it says flee immorality, flee youthful lusts. Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. all sorts of other scriptures. First Thessalonians 4 says every man should learn how to control his own body, not in dishonor as the pagans do. Jesus talks about if you look with a woman and, look at a woman with lust in your eyes and you've already committed adultery in your heart. I mean, there's so many different ones. The Bible talks about, immorality and all of these different things, so it's just interesting how people will try to kind of justify those things, as well as just kind of come up with excuses for why they should still be able to do these things because they don't want to let them go.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of why it's something that I think we need to forego, it's interesting growing up, and I don't know what your experience has been, but growing up, it's typically always been taught that, hey, don't get anybody pregnant, don't get any diseases. And, those are pretty much the main things that people typically point to as the reasons why you shouldn't have sex before marriage. And for me growing up, that's kind of what I heard. It's like, don't bring any babies home and make sure that you understand that you could get some sort of disease. But nobody told me about all the different things like, if you have sex with somebody, then it could create some sort of emotional and physical soul tie to where you're thinking about this person 5 years later, 10 years later, or it's going to cause comparisons when you get married and you're going to, be wanting to focus on having intimacy with your wife, but then you might subconsciously compare, with, somebody that you used to be with in the past, or, just the guilt, the shame associated with it, sharing your past with someone else, and, all of those different things that come along with it, your reputation, your witness.
Yeah. I mean, I go to the verse in the New Testament where it says, "Let no one be sexually immoral or godless like Esau that traded his birthright for a bowl of stew." So he compares sexual immorality to the story of Esau. And speaking from experience, when I was out having sex, not only was I drifting into relationships with the wrong people. My first girlfriend was 5 years. We had sex on the first date and we spent 5 years together, and I was not in love. I had a soul tie.
Yeah.
And when we did break up, I was so depressed that I reeled her back in. And then we broke up again. I tried to reel her back in a second time. It was crazy. But so that soul tie thing is definitely real. And then, but on top of that, what happens is when you are out, expressing that sexual energy physically, you're just out, having sex. You're not saying your best yes, is what I tell people. Then, like you don't, in some weird way, you don't find your purpose, is what I've came to figure out. Because in the last 10 years, I've, harnessed my sexual energy. And because I wasn't out getting hemmed up with the wrong girls, which is what I always did, I was able to focus all my time and energy on just moving the needle forward on the things that mattered most to me, which was writing some books, starting a nonprofit that's going, it required a lot of time and energy. If I was in these bad relationships, I wouldn't have had the time or the emotional bandwidth to pour into these things that I care about. And I think that's what that verse means, that bowl of stew verse is you're not only going to probably miss out on your person because you're going to choose the wrong person, but you're going to miss out on your purpose. And for something very temporary, like a bowl of stew.
Exactly. Yeah. And I totally agree. I once again, same with me, is I got married. For those of you listening, I got married when I was 40 on my 40th birthday. So,
you a virgin up until then?
Sorry?
Were you a virgin up until then?
No. Unfortunately, I mean, no, I wish I was. I wish I was, but no, I lost my virginity in high school, and unfortunately, I went down a path of immorality there for a season, and really, it wasn't until late in my college years where I really understood that this was a sin, and I needed to repent of it, and so there was a season of time where I was promiscuous. And then even after I came to Christ, I struggled, on some level. I had seasons of victory, and then I had seasons where I wasn't doing so well. I'd go a long period of time and I was like celibate and I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to rock it for Christ and all this stuff. And then, I'd have a relapse, and it just kind of was a struggle throughout my 20s, throughout my 30s. And then I finally met my wife when I was 38, and it was just one of those things where it was just a big blessing because, I felt like, being single and trying to, really trying to honor God in this world with all the temptations, it was, it's a challenge.
No doubt. I think it's probably the hardest thing to do
It is.
because you have to adjust your whole life for that one thing. That's why, I competed in bodybuilding years ago when I was in my early 20s. And when you get ready for a show, you have to really limit like your activity. You can't go to certain places because you have to eat every so many hours. So you always have to have like certain food with you. And then you have to get up early and do this amount of cardio and lift. And it's like your whole life is centered around that one decision. That's how it is when you decide that you're going to wait to have sex until marriage. Like, I can't be around women alone. I can't go to certain places because I might fall into sin. Like my whole life is structured
Yeah.
around this one thing.
Yep.
And it is probably, I think it might be the hardest thing, which it seems like even in the church, there's a lot of sexual sin because it is that hard to give up. It's like the last thing people want to give up.
Exactly. Exactly. People can give up drugs, they can give up smoking, they give up drinking, they give up partying, they give up inappropriate music, but
Cussing,
yeah, cussing. Yeah,
that's easy
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah, that's easy because none of those are natural God-given desires. I mean, like the desire to be intimate, the desire to have sex is a physiological, I mean, it's just a natural desire that God wants us to have in the confines of marriage.
Yeah.
But, I think that's one of the main reasons why it's the most difficult one for us to give up because it's not an unhealthy desire. It's just not, it's misplaced until, or we're not able to express that desire until we get married. So
Right. And that's why it works so well. I tell people why marriage, waiting to have sex until marriage works so well. It's because as bad as I want the pleasure of sex, which is really, pretty bad, I equally don't want the pain of divorce. So like when I meet women, I'm like, man, I'd like to. And then I'm like, would you sign the contract, the marriage contract? I'm like, no. And I'm like, all right, I'll wait. And then you wait. And then in that process, it's that tension. And that tension, that's where like diamonds are formed. And that's where all these great things come out of your life. It sucks, to be honest, because it's that tension that you have to like live in and manage. But it definitely works. So another one of your videos that I saw that I know people will want to hear your thoughts on was, is masturbation a sin?
hmm,
So
yeah,
that's something that I believe it's a sin. I know there's not a lot of biblical support, and maybe you're gonna school me on something I don't know about. But I go back to the whole, if you lust after a woman in your mind's eye, you commit adultery in your heart. So I think, if you're gonna climax, you're probably thinking about something either that you did or something, whatever,
yeah,
that you shouldn't do.
yeah,
And so I always think the standard is, you know, definitely not pornography, but not even masturbation, even in your mind. But that's that, however, I tell people it's better than going out and having sex with someone. Not to say that you should do the one thing in replacement of the other, but it would be
right.
better than that. But I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much aligned there because, it's my belief that you're right. The Bible doesn't say anything explicit about, touching oneself, pleasuring oneself. I mean, people try to point to Genesis 38 with Onan, but that has nothing to do with spilling a seed on the ground, has nothing to do with masturbation. That's amazing that people even look at that anymore. And he was just not wanting to, he
Right,
was
Nate?
not wanting to have a child by his brother's, wife, and so that he wouldn't, jeopardize his inheritance. So he spilled a seed on the ground, but he wasn't playing with himself, right? So people need to stop using that as an example. But you know, because of that, once again, as we mentioned earlier, this is an area where I think a lot of people try to say, well, the Bible doesn't say anything about masturbation, so therefore, it's something that we're able to do. But once again, the Bible is very clear about lust. Job 31:1, I've made a covenant with my eyes that I would not look lustfully, upon a woman. And of course, as Jesus said, if you look at a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery in your heart. So, I mean, if we just want to split hairs and just be technical in terms of the scriptures, I guess if you can masturbate without having one single lustful thought, then maybe,
I've tried it.
maybe
I've tried it, and it's not very enjoyable.
it's not enjoyable, and it's not possible, to be honest with you. It's like, exactly. So, and so I mean, I guess, but the reality is that our minds are going to want to fantasize. Our minds are going to want to go in that direction. And as a result, right away, as soon as you start lusting, or God forbid, for people who are incorporating any sort of pornography or soft porn or whatever it is that you want to look at, an image or whatever,
Yeah.
then you're lusting at that point. And that is a sin. And so, but not only that, I always tell people that it's not just Satan, our enemy, is not just content with drawing us into one particular sin. He's always interested in taking us to that next level, right? So I think one of the main things that Satan does is tempts us with sexual boredom. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, okay, I've already done this. I'm tired of this. Now what's next? Right. And at some point, you're going to get tired of just masturbating. At some point, your mind's going to be like, I want the real thing. Like, I want to experience this for real. All the fantasies that I have in my mind, like, I want to experience those. And so I just think that it's one of those things that it's a slippery slope that you can go down, because you're going to get tired of just doing that. After a while, you're going to want to live it out. And that's kind of my perspective as well. I have another video that I talk about, is it a sin in marriage? But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. But no, I think I've often said, a thought leads to a habit, or a thought leads to an action leads to a habit leads to a character, and a character leads to a destiny. But I've heard of people getting jammed up, like they've got so perverted from watching pornography. Like you talk about, the devil always wants you to take you one step further, where they were they were looking at some of the weirdest things. I want to say like bestiality and like weird stuff, because they had gone so far down that rabbit hole, that it had to get more perverted. That's and right. So I think that the standard is nothing. And I know, like, for me, it's like when I'm really good, like I have a good stretch of time. I mean, usually I'm very productive. I'm getting things done. I believe in sex transmutation. I believe it's a real thing. I mean, there's a lot of evidence even around NoFap about, not, retaining your seminal retention. But it's also like that. There's no shame, there's no guilt associated. It's almost like, I don't know if you've ever done like a strict diet. Like when I competed in bodybuilding, you're eating really clean. Like you miss the food. You do, but the moment you eat it, you're like, damn, why did I do that? Like you're grabbing you're pinching your fat on your stomach. You're like, you're like, damn, I shouldn't have done it. Right. So that's what I think it is. It's like, if you're expressing your sexual energy or your sexual gift, as some people call it, in any way besides with your marriage partner, then I feel like that you're missing the mark for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. It feels good leading up to the moment. And then, I mean, let's just get real talk. I mean, as soon as we ejaculate, I mean, there's a whole lot of things that change afterwards for us. I mean, even if you're having sex before marriage and you're a Christian and this is wrong. I mean, the desire is so intense beforehand, but after you get what you want and after you climax, I mean, you're sitting there, you're looking at the person in the bed and you're like, oh man, what am I doing here? Like, I know God is watching me. I know God is upset. I know God is not pleased with what I'm doing. I'm not planning on marrying this person. So I've just violated her, and then there's the whole thing. If she's now thinking that it's something more and you thought it was just something physical, then now you have that guilt on your hands of, okay, how do I explain to her that I'm not really interested in a relationship? And she's thinking, I just gave my body to this guy and he's a Christian guy. So I'm sure he's looking for something more, like a commitment. And then it just muddies the waters in so many different ways, man. It really does.
there's so many women that are in the organization. So I started something called City Fam uh, a few years ago, kind of like a parachurch ministry of sorts. And there's so many women that are in leadership. Some of them are really good looking too. And I'm like, the old me would have had sex with some of these girls, and then they would have been gone out of my life for what, 20 minutes of fun. Now they're like these huge blessings to me, helping me achieve everything that I ever wanted. And it because I learned how to manage this appetite. If I hadn't learned it, you know, I tell men, I'm like, 50% of the population are going to be women. You're going to have to figure this out. If you're going to want to achieve the things you want most in life, you have to figure this out.
No doubt.
So, okay, another one of your videos, and this is something I'd love personally just to hear you talk about, is oral and anal sex a sin in marriage. This is one of your top viewed videos.
Yeah.
So my belief, I guess, is I'll just throw it out there. I want to hear what you have to say. I guess I believe that oral would be okay within marriage, I would imagine. But then anal, I'm like, that's where, I think maybe it's sin. Now, I've heard other people come back and say, basically that your partner's body is as long as they're both consenting, then I've heard Christians say it's okay, that anal sex is okay with your wife, if she's into it and you're into it, that's okay. And I guess I don't know what to tell people. If they ask me, I'm like, that's kind of above my pay grade, I think. Yeah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, once again, I think we're very much aligned there. So, I mean, oral, I think it's very hard to make any sort of biblical argument to say that, that is prohibited or there's something in the Bible. I just don't know where people are getting these ideas that, missionaries, the only position you should have sex and oral sex is prohibited. Like, I don't know where biblically people are pulling. Maybe it's because there's no biblical. I've read the Bible several times, and I don't see anywhere in the Bible where, matter of fact, you could easily make a case for, that there are verses in Song of Solomon and Book of Proverbs that communicate or suggest that it's something beautiful, right? So for that one, I just don't see as being much of a debate. But obviously, if your partner's not comfortable with it, then you have to kind of explore, like, okay, why not? Or, let me be respectful and loving to only do what my partner is, my spouse. I should just probably just, we live in this world where everybody wants to say partner, partner, partner. Like, okay, this is my spouse, right? I mean, like, because partner, everybody's like PC, because it could be two men and two women. Like, no, spouse, opposite sex spouse, to be clear. But the anal one, I think, is definitely a lot more difficult to tie down because, and people will try to point to like Sodom and Gomorrah in the Old Testament, but that was really more so not necessarily talking about anal sex as much as it was homosexuality, because you had men that were penetrating men, right, and dishonoring the sexual code that God had set it forth, which is a man should not lie with another man. So I think it's hard to point to the Sodom and Gomorrah and be like, okay, because that's sodomy or whatever, then that shouldn't be expressed in marriage. I think this is definitely one. I mean, there's obviously some scientific evidence that it can cause some health issues down the road. Obviously, so I think this is one of those things where every couple has to determine their comfort level with that. And I just don't know, once again, because I'm a by the book Bible guy. I can't point to any scriptures that says, a man should not, lie with a woman and in this way, in this fashion. That's a tough one.
Yeah. I like
personally for me, I'll pass on it, personally, because that's just personal, but
it's just not your thing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have any problem making that public, but and
no, that's cool. You in a lot of ways we are the same. I feel like I'm fairly liberal when it comes to things that aren't in the Bible. Like I'm by the book. I'm a fundamentalist when it's, I don't try to negotiate even like, sex before marriage any of that stuff. But there are things that I think are disputable matters, as the word says, and I'm like, I don't think, like, I cuss fairly regularly on social media even, because I'm like, it's not the word to me, it's the intent of the word. If I call you a dum dum, that's going to be way worse than me stubbing my toe and saying shit. It just is. It means
Hmm.
nothing. You know, it's a word that someone invented. I don't know how many ever years ago, and somebody said if you put these four letters in this particular order, that it's a cuss word. Like, I don't. Okay, I mean,
Right.
like
Right.
scuba. I don't know if you know this, but scubula, the word scubula, is in the Bible, which is a very vulgar term for animal excrement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Paul used it, and it's basically the equivalent of the word shit. So I'm like, if that can make it into the Bible, I'm pretty sure that we can use words for emphasis if we need them. You
Yeah,
know,
that's what Philippians 3, where he talks about, I consider all things as dung.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, for the surpassing knowledge of Christ. Yeah, yep.
So yeah, I think I like that stance. You're pretty liberal on if it's not in there, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's good. Um, so what do you tell singles about how to stop falling into sexual sin?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing is we got to make sure that we, don't continue to put ourselves in situations where we know we are going to be strongly tempted in that area. I can remember whenever I was single, like there was times whenever I would like invite a young lady over to my house, and I, for the intent of, not necessarily for the intent of having, being physical with them or anything, but um, renting a movie, it's late, hey, oh, your shoulders are sore. Let me give you a back rub, this, that, and the other, and it was like hugged up on the couch, and it's just very, very conducive to things going too far, even if it doesn't go all the way to sexual intercourse, which for me, most of the time it didn't, but it was just a lot of times, unfortunately, things went too far,
Yeah.
and that's another thing. Like when you're single, I know for me, I went through, a seasons where I was trying to justify like, okay, Lord, I'm not having intercourse, but I'm still doing these other things over here. And I took a lot of pride in the fact that I could say, oh, I went 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, without having any intercourse. But then, like, okay, but was I really sexually pure? Because there's a
Right.
difference between abstinence and sexual purity. Abstinence is just, okay, I haven't done the act of having sex. But
Right.
sexual purity is, okay, am I making out with this girl? Am I fondling? Are we having oral sex? Are we doing all these things? And I can't say like I was perfectly, perfect in those areas for all the time I was single, but, not putting yourself into situations, not feeding your mind with all the things that are going to want to make you do that. Like, for instance, looking at Instagram profiles and stuff like that. Like, that's not porn, but it's might as well be, because
Right.
you got these Instagram models that are half naked, and you can just sit there all day and just scroll on their pictures, and it just feeds your mind with, wow, I wonder what it would be like to be with her,
Sure.
and then it just triggers a thought, which then, leads to an action or something of that nature. And the enemy's crafty in that way. So, and also that I think a huge thing is getting with somebody who's like-minded, right? I mean, like, if you get with somebody else who's a believer, who's just as convicted about this than you as you are, then the two of you are fighting this battle together when you're dating, and you have the Holy Spirit in you and the Holy Spirit in them. And, you all are both really working hard to try to abstain. But if you get
Yeah.
somebody who doesn't have those same convictions, then all it is they're going to be waiting for you to have a weak moment, and then they're just going to pounce,
That's
so
what I tell people about being unequally yoked. I'm like, imagine if you're with somebody and every chance they get, they're trying to stick their hand down your pants. How long do you think it's going to be? How long can you really hold that down before eventually, you cave? Because I know when I start dating, there's probably going to be times when I'm weak and she'll have to be strong for me, and then vice versa. I'll have to be strong for her in order for us to make it to the altar. Because I don't see any way one person's going to be strong enough for both of us.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
think, go ahead.
you go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I really concur. The boundaries are key. When I recommitted myself to celibacy, I rededicated my life to God back in 2011, I think it was. Um, I was very outspoken that I was going to do it, and why I believed it was in my best interest. And then like 3 years into it, I had a girlfriend over the house. We were watching a movie. Never even held the girl's hand. Nothing. We were attracted to each other, but we had never even held hands. And we started making out and just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't grab the emergency brake, and that we ended up having sex. And after that, I didn't spend time alone with a female for like 5 years, 4 years,
Yeah.
something like that, where I just would not even let myself be around them alone because
Yep.
I was like, I don't know what could happen, you know?
Exactly.
And that's, you have to take it that seriously because,
Yeah.
the
You can't put
consequences and many times will be the same as if you didn't try, and trying won't get you there.
Yeah, you can't put your trust in your flesh. Like you can't trust that, okay, I'll be okay, we'll just watch this movie, or like, no. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, you're setting yourself up for, you know, you're setting yourself up for a serious temptation. And I think another thing too is, you know, I'd like to see more men, Christian men, get more serious about marriage and about finding a wife because, I mean, at the end of the day, the easiest way to stop fornicating is to get married,
Right.
and yeah, obviously you don't want to get married just for that. I mean, it took me 40 years to find my wife, but um, I think a lot of guys that I know, they're just not seeking, they're not serious about trying to find a wife. They're just kind of passively kind of trying to hope that maybe God will send them the right
Yeah.
person, and they're not really aggressive about it. I think that's one of my biggest frustrations with a lot of my single friends is that they're just not aggressive about it. And I'm like, I mean, do you just want to either fornicate or jack off for the rest of your life? Like, excuse my French, but like,
Sure.
seriously, like, is that what you want to do? Like, don't you ever want to enjoy guilt-free, passionate sex the way God
Yes.
intended it? Like,
Yes. I say that all the time. Guilt-free sex. People are like, why do you
yeah.
want to get married? I'm like, companionship and guilt-free sex. So how do you do that? Because I'm curious to hear. I feel like I have good discernment. I've been waiting for God to kind of give me the green light on when to date. But when you feel the time is right to date, how do you aggressively pursue that? What do you suggest? Is it dating profile? Get a profile on like a Christian mingle or something like that, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, whenever I was single, I definitely tried several different websites, and I don't regret it. Even though I didn't meet my wife on any of those websites, we met at church. But I don't see anything wrong with it because in this day and age, especially in the midst of a pandemic where everybody's working from home, everything is Zoom. I mean, at some point, we have to get real and say, where am I going to actually meet somebody? I mean, yeah, I can put my faith in God all day, right? But if I'm working from home and my church is shut down and I'm not going to church, or I may go to a church where the options are limited, or everybody at the church is pretty much married. Where am I actually going to meet someone? Am I just going to rely on running into them at Walmart or seeing some pretty girl on aisle 13, like, hey, what's your name is, like, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to find a way to meet people. And I see online dating as, I mean, we do everything else. We do everything else online,
Right.
we do everything else online. We shop online. We do Amazon online. We meet online. Well, what's wrong with meeting somebody else online? And so I don't personally see anything wrong with that. But also, if you are at a church that has a singles ministry, get involved, go to certain events and activities and things like that, and then get involved in ministry so you can observe, this
Yeah.
young lady or this young man, or let him observe you and kind of put yourself out there a little bit. Um, uh,
I
you,
think
you
it's
know,
great. No, I think that that's going to give you community too. And when to go back to the question of how do you keep from falling into sexual sin, when you have community, it makes it a lot easier. The first 6 years I was a Christian, I didn't have great community. I isolated a lot. I saw a lot of movies. I was basically just trying not to sin, um, and it was miserable. And then
yes,
eventually I did sin. I
yep,
fell back into my old lifestyle because I was just so
miserable.
freaking bored. But when you have community, at least you have like things to look forward to on the weekends. You got people to hang out with, and you're not desperate.
Yep,
So you're not going to get on to maybe create a Tinder profile just just for the sake of having it, right? Because you like can't sit home again on another Friday night and watch Cobra Kai or whatever. But no, I definitely think community helps in that area as well.
You know
So,
what? You bring up a good point because whenever I was single, I had a phenomenal group of friends and we were all single. Many of us are still married. I mean, many of us are married now. Some are still single, but we used to do things every weekend. And whether it was bowling, whether it was go to the movies, whether it's go out to dinner, and it really filled that gap of just sitting at home on Friday and Saturday night, feeling sorry for yourself and feeling sad. I mean, so many of us, we would, text the group like, hey, does anybody want to go catch a movie this week? And 5 or 6 people would be like, yeah, I'm not doing anything, let's do it. And it just filled that loneliness gap, and it was
yeah,
really, it had a lot of fun, allowed us to have a lot of fun together and hold each other accountable as well.
that really is the premise of City Fam. Like what we do is we do social and service events, keep us on the right track, keep people from going back to maybe some bad behavior. But also, what we found is a lot of people meet the Lord through it, because we'll invite them to like a movie, or maybe we're even going to a bar or whatever. We have accountability because we're there together. But then they'll jump on these things because it's not like, oh, a church event, for example. They might not be ready for that. And then, but they get around us and they like it. They feel the Holy Spirit, or they just feel something different than they're used to. And next thing you know, they just kind of start moving with us. And next thing you know, they're in church. They get
Mhm.
saved and their whole life changes. And it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you know if you're ready to date? That'd be my next question. Because I,
Yeah.
I feel like God's kind of been stirring me up. Like I feel like he's kind of telling me to get my toe back in the water.
Yeah.
But how do you really know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think for a man, from a man's perspective, I think there's several things that we need to look at. Number one, am I at a place where I am serious about wanting to get married? Because in my mind, if I'm just looking to date and I'm not interested in courtship that leads to marriage, then I don't think I'm ready to date, because we know that's just going to turn into heartbreak, hurting some young lady, because most Christian women are looking to get married, specifically the older that they get. Their
Sure.
biological clock is ticking. They want to get married. So they don't want to waste time with a guy who's going to mess around with them for a year and then he's never been serious. So I think the first thing a guy needs to do is check his motives and say, okay, am I really ready for marriage or am I still playing around? Okay. So if he can check that box and say, okay, yeah, I'm ready for marriage, then it's like, okay, um, have I really dealt with, any sort of major baggage that I have in my life? Doesn't mean we have to be perfect, because I don't believe that. I'm not one of these people that you have to bring a perfect self into a relationship, into a marriage, because that's not going to happen. But if we know that we have some major addiction or something of that nature that could really be destructive and damaging to our marriage, I think it's something that we have to really give some consideration to, because we don't want to bring that in or have to share that major secret with this woman that we love. So taking that seriously as well. And then another thing is like financially. I mean, I don't think a man has to be rich, but I think we have to consider, like, am I in a position financially to be able to you know
Provide.
yeah, provide and take care of my family the way more than likely this woman is going to want me to. And then also looking at, am I in a position where I can spiritually lead my family? Prepare yourself now to be a spiritual leader, so that when that woman comes along, you'll stand out from the other men that she's probably dated that are just interested in physical. But when you can pray with her and talk about sermons that you guys have watched at church together or do a devotional together, it's just really going to set you apart and enable you to really be the husband that God really wants you to be as well. So you know
I love it. It's
yeah.
great. I checked off all the boxes. My finances are starting to improve. That was been like the last piece for me that's really held me back from dating, if I'm honest with myself. I mean, I've been working really hard on the vision that God gave me all my time. I literally spend 14 or 15 hours a day in the office, so I don't have a lot of time. And then I didn't have money on top of it. So
Yeah.
for me, it was like, I'm not even going to go there. And now things are starting to turn a little bit. So I'm thinking, maybe I'll get back out there. But I do think it's important to be able to provide, to have your finances at least in some kind of order. But also, what about purpose? Because I think that that's something that I've talked a lot about. where I have to look at Adam and Eve, and you know how Adam got the job before he got Eve, you know, name the animals. Do you think it's important to kind of have an idea of at least of what your purpose is before you get the person? Because I see a lot of people get this backward and then they don't ever find their purpose. But I think
Yeah.
part of it's because you either marry the wrong person, or because you didn't harness that sexual energy long enough to let it do its thing and kind of help you navigate to your reason for being on this planet.
That's super important because you want to give this woman something to follow, right? I mean, God calls women to be our helpmate, but what is she helping you create? What is she helping you achieve? What goal is she helping you reach? And so, it's very, very helpful. Like when I met my wife, I told her like, hey, I'm going to be in ministry full time. I need somebody to help me get there, and it was very clear. If I had no idea what my purpose was, then, I could get married to this person, find my purpose, and then realize that this person that I married isn't aligned well with what I want to do.
Right.
And it's not her fault. It's because I didn't really know what God was really leading me to do. And so now I'm stuck in this marriage where this woman, she married me with the idea that I was going to be some sort of big corporate guy. And now I'm like, no, I want to go and be a missionary over in Africa and live in a hut.
Right.
She's like, I didn't sign up for that. Like, I think it's only fair to have some idea of what it is God has called you to do.
All right. Last question. I know you got to get off of here. How many times have you been told you look like Denzel Washington?
Man, almost every time I go out of the house, there's somebody that makes a joke about it. And my wife always laughs whenever somebody comes up to me and like, did anybody ever tell you? We're like, oh, here we go again, right? So yeah, I get that all the time. I never say that about myself. My wife never says that about me, but apparently other people do, which is so funny.
He's a handsome man, so it's not a bad thing.
I was about to say, I'll take it. There could be worse people. There could be worse people,
Now, let me give you one more bonus question and I'll let you
Sure
go.
thing.
You think we're living in the end times?
You know what? I think so, but the thing that's difficult about that is the Bible says that, 1,000 years is one day in the Lord's time, and so, I could be like, yeah, I think we're living in the end times based on all the signs that, the Bible talks about, different things that are going to happen. People are going to stray away from the faith. They're going to fall away, this, that, and the other. But a lot of the things that we see now have been happening over the past 100 years, 200 years or whatever. So I do think that we're living in the end times, but in terms of the God's exact timetable, just hard to pinpoint that. Obviously it's impossible for us to pinpoint that, but I
Yeah.
think things are definitely trending in that direction for sure.
Yeah, I'd say so too.
Yeah.
Just everything that's happening with COVID, and there's a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff I heard about in Israel that seems very prophetic, but it's a whole nother road we can go down. So tell me, what are you excited about? Where can people find you? All your website, your social media handles.
Yeah. Yeah. So home base for me is allenparr.com, ALLENPARR.com. It's there that I've, have a lot of different things going on, whether it's training, whether it's free resources for people to download. I've got some online courses that I'm super excited about right now. One of which teaches people how to study the Bible, another one that helps people grow their YouTube channel. It's called Creators for Christ. And that's just really all about, me trying to help train people to build, launch, and grow a Christian YouTube channel. And then I have another course that really, it's called Monetize Your Message. It really just talks about how to earn an income from ministry so you can be full-time. So I'm super excited about those things, but also people can find me on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/The Beat AGP, or they can just search The Beat with Allen Parr on YouTube, and hopefully subscribe. Hopefully they'll enjoy the content.
Yeah, definitely subscribe, guys. He puts out great content, multiple videos a week. And I'll put the links down in the show notes for everybody. But man, great having you on. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom, Alan. I really appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate it, Rob. Look forward to doing it again next time.
Absolutely.